Hey guys, hope you are all having a great day so far. We have some pretty big news to go over, especially regarding the debt ceiling, and more importantly, corporate interests that could cause the next military intervention by Americans into foreign soil for the purpose of claiming ownership to lithium mines. It appears the disastrous wars we engaged in for 20 years was not enough, and Wall Street and friends are now lobbying the government to get more serious and make moves to force Mexico, our lovely southern neighbor, to essentially give up one of their most valuable resources. We have tons to go over, but before we start, let me quickly invite you guys over to my Discord. If you are looking for consistent trading alerts, there is no better place to be. Whether you are in the search for day trades or something less risky and more stable, we offer alternative signals so that you can make profits and grow your trading account. Join the Discord or visit my website and come see for yourself. With that said, let's dive in. Let's begin with the important development regarding America's debt ceiling crisis. Today, the U.S. Senate made preparations to discuss the debt limit deal negotiated by President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Despite an impending default deadline, some senators threatened to delay the measure. The bill was approved by lawmakers from both parties in the House with a 314 to 117 vote on Wednesday, aiming to restrain government spending until the 2024 election and prevent a destabilizing U.S. default. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, a Democrat from New York, stated that the Senate would remain in session until a bill avoiding default was sent to President Biden's desk. Schumer emphasized that any alterations to the bill requiring it to be returned to the House would be unacceptable and likely result in a default. Senators spent a significant portion of Thursday attempting to reach a compromise regarding numerous amendments that had been proposed. They also sought an agreement on a future emergency defense spending bill that would not be subject to spending caps. Schumer initiated the process by adding the bill to the Senate calendar, aiming to minimize the impact of any delaying tactics employed by opponents. The Treasury had warned that it would run out of cash to pay the nation's bills by June 5. Although investors have largely perceived the risk of a U.S. default is resolved, they have turned their attention to other uncertainties, such as Federal Reserve policy. Approval of the bill by the Senate is considered highly likely, with the timing being the only question. Republican Senator John Thune stated that the leadership was working to reduce the number of amendments to a manageable level. Thune indicated that the vote was trending towards the following day. According to Senate rules, any member can cause a delay in the final passage of the bill. Leaders were negotiating with opponents of the bill to avoid such a delay by agreeing to vote on amendments that were unlikely to pass. Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah, a staunch opponent of the bill, criticized it in a Fox interview on Thursday morning. However, he did not state that he would attempt to slow down the debate. In the meantime, the Treasury has been strategizing to maximize its ability to make payments and avoid breaching its borrowing authority. It has been selling bills with unusually short maturities to raise funds and considering delaying the announcement of the sizes of regular 3- and 6-month bill auctions. On Wednesday, the Treasury unveiled plans for a complex debt swap maneuver with the Federal Financing Bank, which would provide an additional $1.9 billion of headroom under the debt ceiling. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham threatened on Thursday to use procedural delays to stall the bill until Tuesday if he wasn't assured that funds would continue to flow to Ukraine. The deal includes a 3.3% increase in defense spending for the next year, but funds for Ukraine's war against Russia have typically been handled separately and are not subject to spending caps. Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, facing resistance from some hawkish Republicans, suggested that additional Pentagon funding could be provided later, emphasizing that national security remains an urgent priority. The debt limit agreement received the support of 2/3 of House Republicans, representing a rare moment of bipartisan agreement in the divided Washington. Oregon Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley, who intends to vote against the measure, predicted that it would pass in the Senate, as it did in the House. Yields on U.S. Treasury bills maturing in early June are rising as the government's cash reserves dwindle, increasing pressure to raise the debt limit. The Treasury's cash balance has fallen to its lowest level in a year and a half, indicating a narrowing window for resolving the standoff. Debt limit negotiations hit an impasse, with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy blaming the White House for resisting spending cuts. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned of catastrophic consequences if the debt ceiling is not raised. Key indicators, such as the bill's curve and ex-date predictions, suggest concern among investors. The U.S. government's cash balance is crucial, and its coffers are at their lowest since December 2021. The cost of insuring U.S. debt has surpassed that of countries with lower credit ratings. Now, Let's get right into today's main story. Let's wind the clock back 5 years. In 2018, Bacanora Lithium, a UK-listed company, announced the discovery of significant lithium deposits in Mexico, claiming it to be the world's largest reserve with 243.8 million tons of lithium, estimated by financial firms to be worth north of $600 billion. With prices of lithium soaring to surpass $70,000 per ton last year, the overall value of this deposit is set to grow significantly over the coming years. It wasn't long before corporate interests began drooling over the potential this new discovery had for their margins, and quickly began to make moves through lobbying, meetings and pressure current Mexican President Manuel Obrador to let them mine it. Essentially, it was like the discovery of America, and every mining company in the world wanted to quick claim ownership of this most valuable resource for themselves. However, Mexico understood that foreign interests don't align with their own interests and that of the people of Mexico, so in February of last year 2022, Mexican President Obrador signed a decree which nationalized the deposit, to the absolute disappointment and utter frustration of the global corporate interests. In fact, this year on February, Obrador signed another decree that handed over responsibility for lithium reserves over to the Energy Ministry, ordering them to take the actions necessary to carry out the nationalization process with intent, and I am quoting the president here, of making the nation be the owner of this strategic mineral. To give you an even bigger picture, Mexico is becoming a bigger and more important player in the lithium industry. Given that cars are now being made electric, and electric cars are set to take over in a couple of decades, lithium value will eventually equal or surpass that of oil, so you can only imagine the prospect this holds. Studies suggest that Mexico may have some 1.7 million tons of lithium. Even though there are close to about a dozen foreign companies that have active mining concessions that aim to develop potential lithium deposits, President Obrador is making quick and executive moves to review and prevent them from taking ownership of this most valuable resource. He stated at an event, and I quote, "What we are doing now is to nationalize lithium so that it cannot be exploited by foreigners from Russia, China or the United States." As you might already guess, the United States of Wall Street is not too happy with these decisions, and have already started making moves by lobbying in Washington in order to put Mexico in the map for politicians and even presidential candidates to quote-unquote, do something about. It doesn't take a genius to see the significant similarities in the way that Congress acts when they want to find justification to start some type of conflict. In the early 2000s, they launched a massive move to invade Middle East countries, fear-mongering Americans that they held chemical weapons of mass destruction in order to get approval. Obviously, 20 years later, nothing was ever found, and it has been now shown that the real reason for the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan was proliferate American corporate interests in the oil sector. As you know by now, Mexico faces huge problems when it comes to corruption by the cartels, which is a totally valid point that should be addressed in a more direct and prioritized manner. What is most interesting of this is the timing. Cartel problems and their growth has never been a centerpiece problem for American politicians outside of campaigns to defend the wall, until now. We are seeing congressmen want to amplify now drug cartels as terrorist organizations in order to have the legal justification to launch more aggressive political and economic attacks on Mexico to bend them to the will of greedy corporate America. In fact, every single Republican presidential candidate is now endorsing treating drug cartels as terrorist organizations. Politicians, who cannot come together to agree on even the most basic and fundamental problems of America, all collectively coming together in the same agenda to treat Mexico the same, should be more than enough probable cause to examine the real intentions they have. Now, I do not want to exaggerate, but if you think the odds of America invading a country like Mexico over a natural resource are impossible or too low, Iraq has entered the chat. For 20 years we were sending troops across the globe, costing trillions of taxpayer money to fund a campaign that only benefited the wealthy, and you think America will not intervene in some capacity by force across a border? America wouldn't even need to launch a major invasion, just quick military operations across that sector. The reason I see this as a probable cause of action is because this problem with Mexico is only going to grow. Bolivia is another country that has very rich lithium deposits. In fact, Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla, once tweeted that American will coup whoever they want in order to get resources for companies like his that depend on lithium. Well, Bolivian president is now calling for a joint Latin America coalition for lithium policy, similar to what OPEC is. America has largely controlled OPEC since its inception, which has allowed the US to control the production of oil and maintain the US dollar as the world's dominant country. Any coalition of Latin American countries would be a significant move away from the US economically. The American ruling class is losing their minds over it, and I guarantee you that over the next months and years, you will be hearing politicians antagonize Mexico and other Latin American countries in more frequent amounts as part of the agenda to hopefully get concessions to launch an aggressive act of war in some capacity, whether it's militarily or economically, in order to replace and monopolize these deposits. Wall Street's entitlement to the resources of other countries is beyond repulsive and outdated. Already I am seeing analysts spout some garbage regarding Mexico's ability to make this a successful venture without the need of private expertise. Any desperate initiative to attack Mexico or any other Latin country will be met with huge backlash, so it will be interesting to see how politicians and Wall Street work together to paint these countries as enablers or terroristic activities in order to manipulate the minds of Americans into agreeing to war. Again, war doesn't necessarily need to happen by military standard. It can be an economic war where tons of impositions and restrictions are raised against these countries until they give in to the demands of the 1%. Thank you for watching this video though its end. Let me know your comments down below. Join my Discord if interested in day trading alerts. I will see you on the next one, to the moon.